giving you a fool. They know I'm the topic.
Yeah, 25 double O.
They heard I'm the topic. I keep them talking, my ears are open. I can hear what they saying. I'm feeling like Martin. I keep it stepping. I'm kicking knowledge like I'm putting out pans. Just ask around and you can tell how I'm rocking. You'll get the message. I ain't sending out spam. The streets is talking and they know that I'm popping. I'm feeling like I got the word in my hand. They heard I'm the topic. I keep them talking, my ears are open. I can hear what they saying. I'm feeling like Martin. I keep it stepping. I'm kicking knowledge like I'm putting out pans. Just ask around.
Hey folks, welcome back. Welcome to our second episode of Truth and Heart with Doc. I'm Dr. Dion Johnson Williams, licensed clinical and forensic psychologist, also known as Doc. Hopefully you have had a great week, a productive week, a peaceful week. And if not, hopefully you're in process of trying to figure out ways to eliminate stress and to figure out how to move you forward in your goals. All right, let's get started. Doc's got something to say. So for those of you, just in case you've been living under a rock for almost the past 2 years, there is this ongoing drama and all this spectacle in the news with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Don't forget, Prince Harry is the youngest child of the late Princess Diana and Prince Charles over in London, and Meghan Markle is the biracial African-American, Caucasian-American actress. She used to play on Suits on the USA cable network. She and Prince Harry married not quite 2 years ago, and they have a little son. He's just such a little yummy little Archie. And so Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, in particular Meghan, ever since becoming an official member of the royal family, she has constantly been making headlines in the British press. And the first of this year, actually, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle announced that they were stepping down as senior members of the royal family, also known as Megxit, Megxit. That's what the media and the British press in particular have dubbed their exit. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit from a cultural perspective as it relates to what relevance does that have to do with us. Let's talk about this, because for those of us who may be in interracial relationships or marriages with significant others, for those of us who may be more significantly or more closely biracial, meaning one parent of one race, another parent of another race, biracial, and what that means, what that looks like, trying to navigate all of these invisible and very visible lines in our society, in our culture. And, I wonder how the two of them are handling that, or if the point that they're at now, if this was always going to result in them getting to this point, meaning removing themselves away from all of that drama as it relates to really a lot of the racial, the prejudicial undertones about Meghan Markle in the British press. Prince Harry recently said that, he felt like it was, and I'm paraphrasing, pretty much his duty to protect his wife and his son from a lot of the scandal and the stress that he saw his mother, the late Princess Diana, go through. And also what he went through growing up in that royal family over there. And he didn't want that for his family. And so, I'm curious how much of this, in terms of this tension, all of this stuff related to Meghan Markle, how much of this is related to, one, her not being British from that culture, because she's American, and our culture can be quite different, even in terms of communication, verbal communication, some of the subtleties and nuances, quite different. So if Miss Markle were British, do you guys think she would still be dealing with all of this chatter in the press? Um, or is the cultural stuff so tied into the more kind of overarching racial undertones here? Like I said, even though her father is white, her mother is black. And so you can tell that she's biracial. When you look at her, some folks can pass a little differently due to kind of like the fairer skin, some of the features. But when you look at Miss Markle, you can tell through some of her physical features that, you know, she's of mixed ancestry of some kind. And so let's talk about this in relationship to, are we prepared, or what happens when we find ourselves entering into these um, cross-cultural biracial relationships? Are we prepared for this as it relates to what that, the impact of that decision on how we live our lives, on our family relationships? Meghan and Prince Harry have decided to split their time as it stands now between North America and Britain. Right now, I believe they're staying up in Canada and maybe looking at a place somewhere closer to where Meghan Markle's mom, Miss Doria, is in LA. But, you know, I wonder, that's got to be stressful though, or that's got to somehow be a pull when you find yourself maybe struggling to not feel caught in the middle when you have chosen this person, your significant other that you love, that you want to spend the rest of your life with, that you want to build a life and a future with, and maybe your family doesn't quite agree with that decision due to that person being from a different background, a different culture, or even of a different race. Let's talk about this, folks. Chime in the discussions below. I remember when I was younger, that can be stressful, especially now. Let's talk about this, sisters. Us Black women, you know, as we think about dating, what does that look like for us, you know, potentially to date outside of our race? Are we prepared to maybe kind of take a stand in the way that Prince Harry has done, to say, you know what, this is not what I'm going to allow from my wife or my son, and I don't care who it is, you're not going to treat them any kind of way, a certain kind of way. That's a hard, fast boundary, folks. And sometimes that can mean that those relationships that you find so near and dear, maybe some those relationships may suffer. I remember when I was younger, maybe about 20 or 21, there was this guy that I was interested in, and he liked me. He was Italian American, part Italian, part Irish, white. And so, you know, we had talked about and, you know, had wanted to be pretty serious with each other, but it all came to a quick stop when his mother found out that we were dating. And his mother was like, absolutely not. And that just is what it is. But, you know, what are some of your experiences with interracial dating? Can some of you kind of look at, or, you know, have an opinion about the fallout with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle and their separation from the royal family and from that culture? Did some of you kind of guess or maybe predict that it would get to this point? Or does this somehow shock or surprise some of you? I think that it can be difficult when there's someone that you love and someone that you know loves you, and of course you want your family, of course you want your community where you're from, if that's important to you, if those relationships are important to you, of course you want those people in those places to accept and open themselves up to this person that's near and dear to you as well. But what happens when that goes just the opposite way. In particular, when this person is from a different background or is of a different race. Let us not forget, folks, what are we, maybe 50, 60 years um, outside of the miscegenation laws in this country, which mean at one point in our beloved United States of America, it was illegal for folks to intermarry, for white folks to intermarry with black folks. Wasn't that long ago, folks, 50, 60 years ago. So while those laws have been overturned, some of those attitudes are still in place, like we don't mix with black folks, or even for some black folk, or brown folk, we don't mix with white folks, or just the mixing. Chime in. What is your feedback? What is your opinion about this situation with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, and in particular, what are your thoughts about interracial dating and dating folks from a different cultural background as you? Would you be prepared, just short of being an heir to the throne, just short of that, would you be prepared to physically remove and relocate and separate yourself away from the family drama, away from the community drama, the conflict, if need be? And again, I said just short of being an heir because, in this instance, money really isn't an issue, or it's a non factor, maybe, to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle as it relates to picking up and relocating and finding somewhere safer, and more calm and more accepting of their relationship. But not a lot of folks have that luxury to just pick up and relocate and go somewhere else, or to just do it in a way where we're going to separate, we're going to move, we're going to put an ocean and a continent between us. For some folks, maybe you don't want to leave the community. Maybe you can't afford to leave the community logistically. But let's talk about that, especially in 2020, folks. Interracial and cross cultural dating. Would you be prepared to take a stand for your beloved in the same way that it looks like Prince Harry has taken a stand for his family? Chime in, chime into the discussions below. Let me know. All right, so let's get ready to transition into our second segment, mental health matters. And today we're going to talk about, or begin our conversation on mass incarceration. And, that is really speaks to kind of like the overwhelming and disproportionate number of brown and black folk, men and women, juveniles and adults who are incarcerated in our country, in particular, men of color. And so I want to talk about this because we're going to break this down from a perspective of what does that look like, if that's part of your truth, part of your history, and what does that look like as it relates to coming home, building again, and emotionally, mentally, what that looks like trying to keep yourself intact and put yourself back together. And so in the United States of America, there are over 2.3 million folks, adults, incarcerated in our jails and prisons. And of that number, roughly a third, a little over 30%, are African Americans. Mind you, black folk only make up 12% of the United States population. So we're only making up 12% of the total US population, but we are over 30% of the prison population and jail population. Same similar numbers are staggering for Hispanics. They are 16% of the adult population, but about a quarter of the prison population. As compared to white folks, who are 64% of the adult population, but only 30% of the prison population. And so the reason why I brought these numbers up is to kind of frame this a little bit for you. So in other words, at some point, whether or not you know somebody directly or indirectly, you are going to be impacted or have a relationship with, directly or indirectly, 9 times out of 10, somebody who's been in jail or prison, or somebody that you love, or somebody that you know of. 9 times out of 10 will have a relationship with a loved one, a father, brother, mother, cousin, sister, best friend, uncle. 1 to 2 degrees of separation with somebody who's been incarcerated. And so today I'd like to welcome my very special guest, Mr. Lawston Williams. He's joining us today for our Mental Health Matters segment. And Lawston is my husband. Lawston is one of those folks, is part of that roughly 25%, used to be part of that 25% adult population of African Americans who were incarcerated in the United States jail or prison. So say hello, everybody, to Lawston. Lawston, say hello to our
Hello.
audience. So, again, like I said, I brought those numbers up because at some point, maybe directly or 2 to 3 degrees of separation, you are going to have some kind of interaction with someone who has been in jail or prison, especially brown and black folk. And so let's talk about what that process looks like for folks coming home. And I don't want this to be kind of like this cliche pat conversation. I don't want to talk about it in a way that everybody else or that a lot of other folks talk about it. I really kind of want to begin to just touch on, to a degree, what mental and emotional health, what that looks like for somebody coming home from jail or prison, what that looks like in relationships. So, Lawston, can you tell us, just in terms of your opinion, what do you think is the biggest obstacle or barrier adults have, when they come home from jail or prison as it relates to their relationships? What do you think is the biggest obstacle or barrier?
Yeah.
Personal relationships, how they see themselves, significant others, family relationships.
I would say one of the biggest barriers is just the time spent away. You know, just not being able to like fully communicate. You know what I mean? Like, because when you're in prison, it's kind of like you would think you're doing a lot of communicating with the population or whatever. Being so confined to where you are, but it's really not. It's like really a lot of antisocial behaviors going on. So I'm just saying that to say, after spending a lot of years or just any amount, period of time in those places, when you get out, that could be kind of a barrier between you and your family or your significant other, because it's like, you're not really used to communicating, you're not used to expressing yourself in certain ways, so you tend to just kind of be like in your own little box.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that could be a barrier, because communication is kind of, is key in any kind of relationship, whether that be, intimate or family relations or whatever. So I would say, that's kind of like that's a significant barrier.
So the communication is it like you have to learn a different way of communicating, because in prison and in jails you interact in one way,
Right.
but that way of interacting doesn't always, or isn't how you typically want to interact
Right.
when you're free.
Right. Yeah. physically, you
Mhm.
know, um, a lot of nonverbals going on. You know what I mean? You really don't have to say anything. It could be looks, gestures, and
Mhm.
just it's just not the same once
Mhm.
you get out. You know,
Mhm.
that type of that form of communication, it just doesn't translate out here into
Right.
society. You know, that's kind of looked at, as just not being normal. You know.
Is that how quickly, or of all the other things that folks coming home from jails and prisons have to manage in terms of, community supervision requirements, parole, probation, housing, employment, all of that other stuff, as it relates to communication. How do you shift in that way potentially and still try to manage all those other obligations and responsibilities?
Well, it's difficult. You know, it definitely takes. You got to be purposeful with it. You know, I mean, I think that's something. I'm just speaking personally for me. Um, I had to be really purposeful with it. As you know,
Mhm.
I just that was something that was constantly on my mind, or in my interactions daily. It was like, I gotta stay conscious of how I'm communicating with, say, for instance, um, you, uh,
Mhm.
my siblings,
Mhm.
my children.
Mhm.
Once I, was fortunate to get a job, my coworkers, my boss, or whatever, supervisor, it was just always a consciousness there to try to kind of, um, you know, shift that communication.
That
It was
sounds like
difficult
that could
too.
be a little heavy, maybe stressful even.
It can be, yeah.
So how did you try to shift and manage all of those, that same aspect of communication but within different dynamics? How did you, or what are some of the ways that you managed and maintain your emotional balance?
Well, like I said, it was definitely difficult. Anybody who spent any significant amount of time, in prison, you know, I mean, what I mean by significant is like,
10 years
10,
at least.
20,
Mhm.
30. I mean, we
Mhm.
all know people that's in prison for long periods of time. And you're just not social, socially, you just don't have those communication skills being confined like that for such a long period of time. So yeah, once you get out, it can be frustrating because sometimes you feel like you the outsider because I know, somewhat that's how I felt like my way of communicating was just so different from everybody else's. It was like, let me just stay to myself because, I'm not really understanding the communication. And so
Mhm.
it was frustrating, but I managed it by just, I think a big part of that was, of course, you helping me out, with
Mhm.
um, trying to manage that,
Mhm.
me having you to talk to,
Mhm.
at times where I probably didn't really feel like talking or didn't want to talk, you know what I mean? It was like I had you there for that. And I think as time went on, and like I said, being purposeful with it, you know what I mean? Like, okay, this is what I need to do to, you know, uh, reacclimate myself back into society. So
Do
it was
you think what
difficult.
you're talking about is pretty common to many folks, especially our men coming home?
Yeah, absolutely.
So more often than not, a lot
Absolutely.
of men probably
Absolutely.
deal with this process.
Absolutely.
Okay, so with that said, y'all, now I'm just gonna kind of go to it in my own way. You had the benefit of me. And, this is what I do professionally. I'm a psychologist, so and a marriage and family therapist. But for the majority of folks who don't have in their close social circle relationships, be it sister, cousin, partner, child, whatever. Do you think that it would help, or what do you think is the reason why some folks who are going through this process don't seek out the support of a professional to help them manage some of this? Because from what you're talking about, sounds like that could be useful.
I think, like I said, I'm gonna just speak from my experience and from the individuals that I know who've gotten out of prison, doing good, right, doing really good right now, and didn't seek out any professional help or whatever. I think it was just a thing where they didn't really think they needed professional help. It was like, I can handle this on my own. It's really not looking at it as being that serious.
Okay.
Not really.
Okay.
Not really fully understanding the gravity of being incarcerated for long periods of time and coming out and not realizing, that some of those issues you're dealing with, you might need, somebody professionally to talk to. And but that's not always the case. I mean, like I said, I know, individuals right now didn't seek out any kind of professional help. Um, you know, holding down steady jobs, supporting family, pretty much they've reacclimated back out to society successfully without the help of professionals.
But those folks, y'all, that Lawson is talking about, I know them. While they're not in the care of or haven't seen a psychologist or therapist, they also have pretty strong support systems in terms of their significant others, their girlfriends, their wives, their extended family members. So they have support there in place. So,
That's important.
with that said, right, what are some of the ways that, because I get it, and y'all know it just is what it is. A lot of times, our men in particular, our brown and black men, really ain't gonna come in to see us on their own if it's not part of a requirement. Brothers really don't want to come in, and that just is what it is. But that still doesn't mean that the support in these things don't need to be addressed. So we're gonna wrap this up, but as we do, Lawson, can you give us or talk to us about what are some of the ways that those of us who are in relationship with, connected to folks who have been in jail and prison and are coming home, what are some of the ways that we can kind of help to support that process and to support the person and to help and to play our part in the relationship?
Nothing long and extensive, real simple. You just gotta have patience. You just gotta have patience. Stuff takes time. So, you just gotta be patient with that person. You can't like rush them and expect them to just, you know, reacclimate just like that. Just gotta be patient. You gotta be patient and diligent with your efforts.
Patience and diligence. And this goes for our women as well, for women coming home from jails and prisons. Right? And our juveniles.
Anybody coming out of those, incarcerated situations.
All right, folks. Lawson, thank you so much for joining us today for our Mental Health Matters segment. Folks, please chime in. It's a lot to chew on that we've discussed today. Chime in the discussions below. And so that's it for this week's episode of Truth and Heart with Doc. Let your mind be clear to recognize the truth and your heart open to receive it. See you next week. Bye-bye.